It was a quiet evening in the small suburban town, the kind of night where the air felt crisp and the streetlights flickered like distant stars. The protagonist, a hard-working homeowner named Alex, decided to treat themselves to a rare, quiet dinner at the local Chinese restaurant. After weeks of stress, working long hours, and managing HOA meetings, a peaceful meal sounded like the perfect way to unwind. The soothing sound of traditional Chinese music played in the background, and the smell of sizzling vegetables and soy sauce filled the air as the soft hum of conversation blended with the clinking of dishes. As Alex stepped inside, the ambience welcomed them like an old friend, offering a reprieve from the chaos of daily life. It wasn't the fanciest restaurant in town, but it had a charm that made it special, a place where the owners greeted you by name and always remembered your favorite dish. Alex slid into their usual booth by the window, savoring the moment of peace. The restaurant was a cozy haven, mostly empty on weeknights, but tonight, a handful of customers were scattered throughout the dimly lit dining room. Alex's waiter, an older Chinese man with a warm smile, approached the table, ready to take the order. With a gentle smile, Alex ordered in English, as always, "I'll have the General Tso's chicken and some egg rolls, please." The waiter nodded politely, his face showing no surprise at the use of English. He had been in America long enough to understand that it was, after all, the primary language here. Everything seemed perfect. The steady rhythm of life outside the window, the low murmur of background chatter, and the comforting scent of Chinese spices. It was all so normal. But as the waiter turned to leave, Alex's calm was shattered by the sharp sound of a voice, loud, grating, and demanding. "I can't believe you're speaking English in a Chinese restaurant." The voice cut through the peaceful atmosphere like a knife through butter. Alex's heart skipped a beat as they turned toward the source of the interruption. Across the room, a woman, perhaps in her late 60s, was glaring directly at them. Her frizzy hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her outfit was a mismatched combination of brightly colored patterns, making her seem out of place in the otherwise subdued restaurant. Her face was twisted in an expression of pure disdain, eyes narrow as if she had just caught someone committing an unforgivable sin. Confusion flooded Alex's mind. Who was this woman? And why was she staring at them with such hostility? The woman wasn't done, though. She leaned forward in her seat, crossing her arms as she muttered loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear, "This is a Chinese restaurant, not some American fast food joint. Have some respect." The words seemed to hang in the air, as if daring anyone to challenge her. Alex blinked, unsure if they were dreaming. Was this really happening? Here, in the middle of a peaceful dinner, they had become the target of some random woman's rant for simply speaking English. The room fell deathly quiet. The soft clinks of dishes ceased, and every eye in the restaurant seemed to lock onto the scene unfolding in the corner. The waitstaff exchanged glances, frozen in place, unsure of how to respond. And for a moment, Alex wondered if it would all pass, if the woman would return to her meal and let them enjoy their own. But that wasn't going to happen. No, this wasn't going to be a simple misunderstanding. This was just the beginning. Suddenly, Alex could feel it, a shift in the air. The tension was palpable. It was as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath, waiting for something explosive to happen. Little did they know, the woman wasn't just a random customer. She was Karen, an outspoken, overbearing member of the local HOA, notorious for her self-appointed role as the neighborhood enforcer of decency and community standards. And tonight, she had set her sights on Alex. The storm was just beginning. Alex's hand trembled slightly as they reached for their glass of water, unsure of how to respond to the unprovoked outburst. The woman, Karen, Alex now realized, hadn't stopped staring, her eyes burning with judgment. The air in the restaurant felt suddenly heavy, oppressive, as if the weight of Karen's words was pressing down on everyone in the room. A soft murmur rippled through the diners as the tension mounted. Some tried to go back to their meals, pretending the confrontation wasn't happening, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to react. Alex, caught in the sudden spotlight, felt the heat of the woman's gaze like a spotlight on them. "Excuse me, ma'am, but is there a problem?" Alex finally asked, trying to keep their voice steady, though a knot had formed in their stomach. Karen's lips curled into a thin, almost venomous smile as she stood up and approached Alex's table. Her movement was deliberate, slow, like a predator circling its prey. "Oh, there's a problem, all right," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's people like you who come into places like this, speak your English like it's the only language that matters, and completely disregard the culture of the people who own this restaurant. You think it's your country, don't you?" The words hit like a slap to the face. Alex's breath caught in their throat as Karen leaned over the table, her eyes narrowing dangerously. The entire restaurant was watching now, the uncomfortable silence stretching on far too long. Every eye was locked on the scene, and Alex's heart pounded in their chest, the suffocating heat of humiliation beginning to set in. "I'm sorry," Alex said, trying to keep their tone calm, "but I don't see the issue here. The staff speaks English, and I've always ordered in English without any problem." Karen scoffed, dismissing Alex's words as if they were irrelevant. "That's just it. You don't see it, because you don't care. It's disrespectful to speak anything but Chinese in a Chinese restaurant. They're immigrants, and they deserve respect. You deserve a lesson in respect, young man." The venom in Karen's voice made Alex's skin crawl. The logic was nonsensical, but Karen was making sure everyone in the room heard her version of the story. The murmurs in the room grew louder, and Alex could sense a shift in the atmosphere. Something was about to snap. "Ma'am," Alex said, trying once again to diffuse the situation, "I'm just here to enjoy my dinner. I mean no disrespect to anyone, least of all the staff." But Karen wasn't listening anymore. She turned away from Alex, raising her voice so that everyone in the restaurant could hear. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that ruins this neighborhood. People like him don't even care about our culture. They come in here with their entitlement, thinking they can do whatever they want." Her finger jutted out towards Alex accusingly. "I'll be telling the manager about this. They need to know what kind of trouble you're causing." The crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath. Alex's face burned with embarrassment, but beneath that, a surge of anger bubbled up. It wasn't the accusation itself. It was the sheer audacity of this woman to pick a fight over something so trivial, to drag them into her petty crusade. As Karen made a beeline for the manager, Alex's eyes flicked to the rest of the diners, who all seemed to be looking down at their plates or staring into their phones, avoiding the conflict like the plague. A sense of dread crept over Alex. This wasn't going to stop with just words. Karen had a reputation for making mountains out of molehills, and Alex knew that her involvement with the HOA meant that this situation could easily escalate beyond the walls of the restaurant. Karen's footsteps were loud in the otherwise quiet space as she approached the manager, who was standing near the back of the restaurant. Alex's chest tightened. They tried to steel themselves, but the tension was undeniable. "Let's see how they handle this," Karen muttered under her breath, not caring who could hear. The manager, a calm and measured man named Mr. Wong, greeted Karen with a polite nod. Alex couldn't hear their conversation, but they could see Karen gesturing animatedly, pointing towards their table. Alex's grip tightened on the edge of their seat. The walls felt like they were closing in. This wasn't just a dinner anymore. This was turning into something much bigger, something Alex had no control over, and it wasn't going to end well. The room seemed to shrink as Karen's voice rose, now unmistakably demanding. Alex's gaze followed her as she spoke heatedly with Mr. Wong, her arms flailing in exaggerated gestures. The manager, ever calm, nodded in understanding, but Alex could tell from the set of his jaw that he was getting frustrated with Karen's relentless tirade. The once friendly ambience of the restaurant had become a pressure cooker, and the temperature in the room was rising. Alex looked around, their heart pounding in their chest. The other diners were pretending not to notice, but it was obvious that every eye was on the confrontation. There was nowhere to hide. The murmurs of curiosity and judgment were now part of the thick, suffocating air that made it feel like a prison. Karen's voice rose once again, louder and sharper. "This is a Chinese restaurant, not some cheap American fast food joint." She spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "People like you come in here, make a mockery of this place, and then you act like you belong. Well, you don't. You can't even show the basic respect." Alex tried to keep their face neutral, but their hands were clammy with sweat. Karen's accusations didn't make sense, and her irrationality was infuriating. But it was the audience, the other diners, who were starting to weigh in, their uncomfortable glances making Alex feel more isolated than ever. Suddenly, Karen turned on her heels and marched toward Alex's table, her shoes clicking sharply on the tiled floor. Every step she took felt like a drumbeat in the thick silence, and Alex's stomach twisted. There was no avoiding this now. "I want the manager to do something about you," Karen said, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. She was practically spitting in her anger. "I want you removed from this restaurant. You've disrespected the owners and everyone here. I won't stand for it. You think you can just come in here and do whatever you want. Well, I'm going to make sure this never happens again." Alex stood up slowly, their mind racing, trying to figure out how to de-escalate the situation. But there was no reasoning with Karen, no explaining the situation, no common ground. She wasn't interested in fairness. She was intent on making an example of Alex. They took a deep breath, willing themselves to stay calm. But the weight of the moment made it almost impossible to remain composed. "I don't want any trouble," Alex said, their voice steady but tight. "I'm just here for dinner. I haven't done anything wrong." Karen didn't care. She took another step toward the counter, her eyes locked on Mr. Wong. "You need to do something. Call the police if you have to, but this is unacceptable. I won't let you ruin this place." Her voice was shrill, desperate, and yet her conviction was chilling. She wasn't just trying to win an argument. No, Karen was trying to make sure Alex would pay for what she perceived as an affront to her own sense of order. Alex's stomach sank. The warning bells were ringing loud in their mind. This was no longer just a bad dinner. This had all the hallmarks of a battle that would follow them back to their home, and worst, to the HOA. The relentless woman had a reputation for not letting things slide, and Alex could already imagine her turning this into a neighborhood spectacle, a smear campaign to make sure they were branded as an outcast in the community. The moment stretched on painfully, as Alex felt trapped between Karen's fury and the fragile calm of the restaurant. Mr. Wong, the manager, exchanged a quick glance with Alex, his face unreadable. His next words would change everything. "I'm afraid I can't remove this customer, Karen," Mr. Wong said, his tone respectful but firm. "This is a public restaurant. There is no issue with how this customer is speaking. I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave if you're not satisfied." Karen's face turned red. For a second, there was a flicker of disbelief in her eyes, as though she couldn't comprehend that anyone would defy her. She stepped forward again, her fists clenched at her sides. "No," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand. I will make you understand. I will make sure everyone in this town knows what you're doing to me. I won't let you." Before she could finish, Alex's phone buzzed in their pocket. The sound was sharp and unexpected, slicing through the tension. It felt like a lifeline. Alex hesitated for a moment, then pulled the phone out, glancing at the screen. A notification from the HOA popped up. "Urgent. Karen has filed another complaint. Please respond immediately." The irony of it hit hard. Karen, the very person causing the chaos, was now trying to use her power to control the situation, just like she had done so many times in the past. Alex's heart raced. This wasn't just about a confrontation over dinner anymore. This was about their reputation, their peace, and the insidious way Karen had already started to turn the tables. This wasn't going to end here. But how far was Karen willing to push this? Karen's face flushed with anger, her hands shaking at her sides as she glared at Mr. Wong, who remained calm in the face of her fury. But Alex could see the cracks beginning to show in the manager's otherwise collected demeanor. The pressure was mounting, and it was only a matter of time before something broke. "Fine," Karen spat, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "If you won't do anything about it, I'll take it into my own hands." Her voice trembled with barely contained rage as she turned sharply on her heel and stormed toward the exit. The tension in the air grew thicker, an electric buzz running through the room, but Alex couldn't help the sinking feeling in their gut. This was far from over. They hadn't seen the last of Karen. The murmurs of the diners resumed, but they were far from reassuring. A handful of people exchanged uncomfortable glances. Others whispered behind their menus, but no one seemed willing to step in. The restaurant had become a stage for an act Alex never asked to be a part of. Seconds later, the sound of the front door opening and closing with a sharp click echoed in the restaurant. Alex felt a chill settle over them, a cold certainty that things were escalating far beyond an argument over language. Then, just as suddenly as Karen had left, she was back. But this time, she wasn't alone. Alex froze, heart hammering in their chest, as Karen re-entered the restaurant with a police officer by her side. The officer was tall, with a professional air and a neutral expression. But Karen was relentless, her face contorted in rage as she pointed a shaking finger toward Alex's table. The officer glanced at Alex with a slight tilt of his head, clearly unsure of what was happening. Alex's throat went dry, their palms clammy as the officer's gaze fell on them. "This is the one," Karen said, her voice laced with venom. "This person is causing trouble, harassing me with their disrespectful behavior, speaking English in a Chinese restaurant. This kind of thing cannot be tolerated. I demand you arrest them for harassment." The officer blinked, clearly struggling to process the absurdity of the situation. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I understand what's going on here," he said slowly. His voice was polite but skeptical. "You're saying this person," he motioned toward Alex, "harassed you by speaking English?" Karen's eyes gleamed with self-righteous fury. "Yes, exactly. It's a blatant disregard for the culture of this place. You have to do something. The restaurant's employees are being disrespected by this person. They don't belong here." Her voice crescendoed, growing louder and more erratic with every word. Alex's mind raced. What is she trying to do? This was beyond a simple complaint. It was a full-on attack. Karen wasn't just trying to prove a point. She was weaponizing the situation, trying to turn it into something far bigger than it ever needed to be. The officer, clearly unsure of how to handle a complaint as ridiculous as this, shifted uncomfortably on his feet. He turned toward Mr. Wong, who stood by the counter, visibly perplexed. Mr. Wong's expression was one of disbelief, but he spoke calmly, his voice firm but measured. "Officer, there is no issue here. This is a restaurant. We serve anyone, regardless of what language they speak. There is no disrespect. This customer was simply placing their order in English. There's no reason to involve the police." The officer's brow furrowed as he considered this. It seemed that Karen had already worn out any patience the officer might have had. Still, she wasn't backing down. "No," she insisted, her voice sharp. "This is about respect. This is about our community. You need to do something about this person. If you don't, I will file a formal complaint with the HOA." The officer sighed, rubbing his temple as if the weight of the situation was starting to sink in. "Ma'am, unless there's an actual legal violation here, there's nothing I can do. Speaking the language of your choice is not a crime." Karen wasn't done, though. She stepped forward, her eyes wide with a manic glint. "I'll make sure this restaurant never gets another customer again." I'll call the HOA. I'll make sure the whole neighborhood knows that they're allowing this to happen." The officer, now losing patience, took a firm step toward Karen, his voice cold. "Ma'am, you are causing a disturbance. If you don't leave, I'll have to ask you to step outside. You're disrupting the peace." The room fell silent once more. The eyes of every diner in the restaurant were trained on the scene. It was as if the entire world had come to a standstill, all waiting for Karen's next move. And then it happened. Karen's expression twisted into one of pure fury. Without warning, she shouted, "You can't tell me what to do. I'm calling my lawyer, and this isn't over." She shoved past the officer, nearly knocking over a chair as she stormed toward the door again, muttering threats under her breath. But this time, there was something different in the air. Something had shifted. The officer's patience had worn thin, and the other diners were no longer pretending to be disinterested. Alex's heart pounded in their chest as they realized that Karen had gone too far. This was no longer a simple matter of being rude at a restaurant. This was harassment, and it wasn't just Alex who was watching. It was everyone. The suspense hung thick in the air. What would happen next? Would Karen get away with this madness, or would the officer take action? The door slammed shut behind Karen, with a finality that echoed in the silent restaurant. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The tension was so thick, it could have been cut with a knife. Alex's heart pounded in their chest, adrenaline still coursing through their veins as they tried to process what had just happened. Karen was gone, but her presence lingered like a dark cloud hanging over the room. The officer turned slowly, his face unreadable, but there was a flicker of frustration in his eyes. He had been caught between his duty to uphold order and the absurdity of the situation. But now, as the restaurant returned to its quiet hum, it was clear that something had shifted. This wasn't just about a complaint anymore. This had become a battle that could spill over into Alex's life in ways they couldn't yet understand. Alex glanced at Mr. Wong, who was still standing near the counter, looking as though he had just stepped off a battlefield himself. The tension between them was palpable, but then, as if realizing the weight of the moment, Mr. Wong took a deep breath and nodded toward the door. "She'll be back," he muttered, shaking his head. "That woman. She's trouble. She's been causing problems for a long time." Alex's stomach twisted. They'd heard whispers about Karen and her role in the HOA, the woman who believed it was her job to monitor everyone's behavior and enforce the standards of the neighborhood. But hearing it from someone like Mr. Wong, who had lived in the area for years, made it all the more real. This wasn't just a one-time incident. It was a symptom of something much darker. The officer seemed to sense the shift in the room as well. He glanced at Alex one last time, his voice low and apologetic. "I'm sorry, but I can't do much more. I suggest you file a report with the HOA if she continues harassing you. If she comes back here, we'll have to take it up with her again." He turned and walked toward the door, leaving behind an almost deafening silence in his wake. Alex watched him go, their mind racing. Karen had taken the first step. The next move would be theirs. But how? Alex felt a pit form in their stomach as the reality of the situation began to set in. They had never expected their peaceful evening to turn into a full-on confrontation. But the worst part, it wasn't over. Karen was still out there. And if she had her way, this would escalate far beyond a simple dinner dispute. The waiter, who had been silently observing the chaos from the sidelines, approached the table cautiously. His expression was apologetic, but his voice was firm. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. If there's anything we can do." Alex cut him off with a wave of their hand. "It's not your fault. But I don't know what's going to happen next." The waiter nodded sympathetically but hesitated. "You should know something," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Karen's not just some angry customer. She's a real pain in the neck around here. She's been trying to control the neighborhood for years. Everything from the HOA rules to the local businesses. We've had our share of run-ins with her." The weight of those words hit like a ton of bricks. Alex suddenly realized just how deep Karen's influence ran. If she could cause this much chaos in a simple restaurant, what would she do to someone who was a regular target in the neighborhood? The thought sent a chill down their spine. "Thanks for the heads up," Alex muttered, already calculating the potential fallout. "I'll have to think about what to do next." But the problem was, there wasn't much time to think. Karen wasn't just a loudmouth with a vendetta. She was a person who had learned how to exploit the system, and now she had made Alex the target. As Alex sat back in their seat, the door to the restaurant swung open once again. Their hearts skipped a beat, expecting Karen to walk back in, ready to finish what she had started. But instead, a man entered, a tall, well-dressed individual in a sharp suit. He looked around the restaurant as if searching for someone, and then his gaze landed directly on Alex. For a split second, the room held its breath, the tension crawling back into the air. Alex's mind raced. Who was this guy? Why was he here? The man approached the table slowly, his steps deliberate. He was older, perhaps in his late 40s, with an air of authority that immediately made Alex feel uneasy. "Are you Alex?" he asked, his voice calm but assertive. Alex nodded cautiously, unsure what to expect. "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" The man paused for a moment before answering, his expression unreadable. "I'm Daniel Heller. I'm a lawyer. I represent Karen Wilson." The blood drained from Alex's face. This was it. Karen was escalating this. And now, it was personal. Alex's heart skipped a beat as the name Karen Wilson hung in the air like a heavy cloud. The man in the suit, Daniel Heller, pulled out a business card from his jacket pocket and placed it carefully on the table. His eyes locked with Alex's, and there was no mistaking the serious edge in his demeanor. This wasn't a casual visit. This wasn't about an innocent complaint. "I represent Ms. Wilson in various matters," Daniel said, his tone smooth but cold, "and I've been informed about the incident at the restaurant. I'm here to discuss the situation before it escalates further." The words echoed in Alex's mind. Escalates further. The moment those words left Daniel's mouth, they felt like a warning, a preemptive strike before Karen could launch her full attack. Alex could feel the walls closing in around them. First, Karen had caused a scene at the restaurant. Now her lawyer was here, making it clear that she wasn't just angry. She was building a case. Alex's mind raced. What did this man want? Was this a threat, or was it just another manipulation in Karen's ongoing campaign? The more they thought about it, the worse it seemed. In a neighborhood ruled by the HOA, where Karen had her claws dug deep into every corner of local politics, the law could be a dangerous weapon. Daniel didn't seem to notice the mental spiral Alex was in. He continued, his voice smooth like oil. "What happened here today, at the restaurant, is of concern to my client. Ms. Wilson takes great pride in maintaining the integrity of our community and the establishments that serve it." He paused, watching Alex for any sign of acknowledgement. "She believes that your actions today, a deliberate disregard for the customs of this establishment, were both disrespectful and disruptive. We're prepared to take legal action if this behavior continues. My client is particularly concerned about how this will reflect on the neighborhood, especially in light of her position in the HOA." Alex's blood ran cold. The HOA. That was where the real danger lay. This wasn't just about a rude customer and a language barrier. This was about Karen's ability to use her power within the community to control and manipulate those around her. And now, it seemed she was using the HOA to turn the entire weight of the neighborhood against them. "I didn't do anything wrong," Alex said, their voice barely above a whisper. The words came out shaky, but they forced themselves to speak with more conviction. "I wasn't disrespecting anyone. I just wanted to have a quiet dinner." Daniel's lips curled into a thin, almost imperceptible smile. He wasn't here to listen to reason. He was here to put the pressure on, to make Alex feel cornered and helpless. "That's what we're here to determine," he said, his eyes cold but calculating. Whether your actions were indeed an innocent mistake or part of a larger pattern of disruptive behavior, either way, we have a clear path to address this. Alex swallowed hard. This wasn't just a personal confrontation. This was something much bigger. Karen wasn't just targeting them anymore. She was setting the stage for a full-on legal and social assault, leveraging her position to ruin Alex's reputation and undermine their credibility in the community. But what could Alex do? They were already in too deep. Leaving the restaurant didn't seem like an option anymore. And with the HOA hanging over their head like a sword of Damocles, they realized that every decision moving forward would either tighten Karen's grip on them or give them a chance to break free. Daniel leaned in, his gaze never leaving Alex. "You don't have to take my word for it," he said, his tone darkening slightly. "I'll be sending a formal letter outlining the complaints, and I expect a response within the week. My client has every intention of seeing this through. And let's just say, she has a way of making things happen." His words were a silent threat, and it was clear he was no stranger to using the law to get what he wanted. Alex's mind raced. Was this how far Karen had gone? Was this the beginning of a legal war, or was there another way to stop this before it got worse? As Daniel stood to leave, he turned to offer one last remark. "You've been warned. If you value your peace of mind, I suggest you cooperate with my client. It's better for everyone involved." The door clicked shut behind him with a finality that sent a wave of cold dread crashing over Alex. For a long moment, they just sat there, staring at the business card on the table. The weight of the situation was suffocating. Karen's reach had extended far beyond what they had ever imagined, and now it seemed like she had the law on her side. The sudden realization hit Alex hard. There was no escaping this now. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was a threat. And this wasn't just a simple dinner dispute anymore. It was war. But as the door swung open once more and a gust of cool air swept in, Alex's pulse quickened. Was that a chance, or was it just another obstacle standing in their way? The weight of the conversation lingered like a storm cloud. Alex could feel the air growing heavier with each passing second as they stared at the business card Daniel had left behind. The words Karen Wilson and legal action swirled in their mind, mixing with the relentless pounding of their heart. The stakes had skyrocketed. It wasn't just about dinner anymore. It was about survival in a community controlled by the very person who had made Alex's life a living nightmare. But as the minutes ticked by, Alex knew they couldn't allow fear to take over. The more they thought about it, the more they realized they had no choice but to push back. If Karen thought she could walk all over them with her HOA-backed legal threats, she had another thing coming. Taking a deep breath, Alex stood up and tossed the business card onto the table. The decision had been made. They weren't going to let Karen win. But where would they begin? Their phone buzzed, breaking through the heavy silence of their thoughts. It was a message from a number they didn't recognize. The message was short and to the point. "I saw what happened at the restaurant. Don't let her get away with this." Alex's fingers froze over the screen as they read the message again. Who was this? A fellow neighbor. Someone who had witnessed the confrontation. And how did they know what had happened? Before they could think too much about it, another message followed. "Meet me at 8 p.m. I have information about Karen. You're not alone in this." A wave of curiosity and suspicion washed over Alex. It could be a trap. Someone looking to manipulate them even further. But then again, if it was someone who shared their frustration with Karen's behavior, it could be the ally they desperately needed. The decision felt immediate. They couldn't afford to ignore this chance. Whether it was a lifeline or a trap, Alex was willing to take the risk. They needed to know more. They needed to know how deep Karen's web really went. As the clock ticked closer to 8 p.m., Alex prepared themselves, steeling their nerves for whatever was waiting. They dressed quickly, pulling on a jacket and slipping their phone into their pocket, determined to make it through this encounter. They didn't know what they were walking into, but they knew they couldn't do this alone. The streets were empty when Alex stepped outside. The usual hum of the neighborhood stilled as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. The evening air was cool, but there was a faint unease in the wind, as if the world itself could sense the tension building. As Alex walked toward the designated meeting spot, a small park near the edge of the neighborhood, they couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. No longer was it just a matter of a rude customer and a misunderstanding. It was now a war for control. The park was empty, bathed in the dim glow of streetlights, with only the rustling of leaves breaking the silence. Alex's footsteps echoed in the quiet as they scanned the area, wondering if they had been missiled. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was a woman, her face partially obscured by a hood. She stopped a few feet away from Alex, her presence both comforting and mysterious. Without a word, she handed Alex a thick folder. "This is everything," she said, her voice low but steady. "Everything you need to know about Karen Wilson. Her connections, her tactics, and her biggest weakness." Alex's heart pounded, the weight of the folder in their hands almost unbearable. The woman's words hung in the air, heavy with promise. If this information was as valuable as it seemed, it could change everything. "You'll need this," the woman continued, her eyes scanning the surrounding area as if making sure they weren't being watched. "But be careful. Karen doesn't play fair. She'll stop at nothing to get what she wants." Alex nodded, already opening the folder. Inside, there were pages of notes, photographs, and what looked like emails and letters. A treasure trove of information. But as they flipped through the pages, something caught their eye. A name. A name that sent a cold shiver down their spine. Daniel Heller. The same lawyer who had come to intimidate them earlier. And according to the notes, he wasn't just Karen's lawyer. He was her right-hand man. Someone who had helped her manipulate the HOA rules, secure her position, and even push out people who dared to stand against her. Suddenly, the pieces began to fall into place. Karen wasn't just a bitter, controlling neighbor. She was part of a much larger, insidious system. A system that had likely been in place for years, subtly forcing out those who didn't conform to her idea of the perfect neighborhood. The weight of this realization hit Alex hard. This wasn't a fight they could win with just words. This was going to require strategy, allies, and a lot of courage. Alex closed the folder slowly, their mind racing with possibilities. The next move would be crucial. They couldn't afford to make a misstep. The woman gave them a final look, her eyes intense. "You'll need allies. Karen's web is bigger than you think. But if you're serious about taking her down, I'll help you." Before Alex could respond, the woman disappeared back into the shadows, leaving them alone with the weight of the information and the daunting task ahead. Alex stood in the dimly lit park, the folder still gripped tightly in their hands. The shadows where the mysterious woman had disappeared seemed to close in, wrapping around them like a cloak of uncertainty. The quiet stillness of the night felt oppressive now, each passing second heavier than the last. The weight of the secrets in the folder, the revelation of Karen's influence, and the looming legal threats from Daniel Heller were all crashing in at once. Alex's heart was racing. This wasn't just about standing up to a neighbor anymore. This was a battle for control of their entire life. But there was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, Alex turned on their heel and walked briskly toward home, their mind a storm of thoughts. Every step felt like a countdown to the inevitable confrontation that was waiting just around the corner. The information inside the folder was like a weapon they needed to use wisely, or it could all backfire. As they reached their front door, Alex paused, glancing over their shoulder as if expecting someone to be there, watching them. The silence of the night seemed to stretch out, endless and suffocating, but there was no one. Just the familiar, eerily quiet street they had always known. Inside, the familiar comfort of their home did little to ease the tension that had taken root. Alex locked the door behind them, dropped the folder on the kitchen table, and sat down. They needed a plan. They needed to think through their next move carefully. What could they do with the information in the folder? How could they possibly take on someone as powerful as Karen Wilson? Her influence was everywhere, from the HOA to the businesses in the area to the lawyer she had by her side. But in that moment, Alex remembered something that had been nagging at them since the first encounter with Karen. Her biggest weakness. The words from the mysterious woman echoed in their mind. Karen has a weakness, and you need to find it. What if the key to winning wasn't fighting Karen head-on with legal threats, but exposing her vulnerabilities? Every villain had one, didn't they? Alex flipped open the folder again and began sifting through the documents, piecing together the patterns. It didn't take long before they found something that made their breath catch in their throat. It was a set of emails between Karen and several other members of the HOA board. The content was damning. They revealed how Karen had systematically manipulated the board to get her way, using everything from intimidation to bribery to secure her position of power. There were mentions of under-the-table deals, threats against certain residents, and even a few references to situations where Karen had made things disappear. Dirt on certain neighbors who had gotten too close to uncovering her secrets. Alex's mind whirred, the implications of what they were reading unfolding rapidly. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. This was corruption on a scale they hadn't imagined. Karen wasn't just a petty neighbor with too much power. She was a tyrant with a carefully constructed empire built on manipulation and fear. But now, Alex had the ammunition. The question was, what would they do with it? As they read through the last of the documents, a sudden knock on the door startled them, making their heart leap in their chest. Their first instinct was to ignore it, but something told them that this wasn't just anyone. It couldn't be. Slowly, cautiously, Alex moved toward the door and peered through the peephole. It was the woman from the park. Without thinking, they opened the door. "Is everything ready?" the woman asked, her voice low but urgent. "Karen's not going to back down. If you want to make your move, now's the time." Alex felt a surge of determination. It was now or never. "Let's do it," they said, their voice steady. The plan had been laid out. The information in the folder was their weapon. But the next step was crucial. They weren't just going to expose Karen's secrets. They were going to show the whole neighborhood who she really was. And that was going to take courage, strategy, and a little bit of risk. Together, they left the house. The streets still felt unnervingly quiet. But now, Alex felt a sense of purpose building inside them. The cards were on the table. Karen's grip on the neighborhood had been challenged. And no matter what happened next, Alex wasn't going to back down. The fight for their peace had just begun. And this time, Karen wasn't going to be the one holding all the cards.